Aloha kākou, mahalo ka hui ho ana o kākou, ke pule. E hoʻomau ana ma luna o ka kākou mau Haʻawina hui ki pai. ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi a ʻike Aukahi. O keia ka māhele ʻike Aukahi o keia pule. Ua pōmaikaʻi kākou, ka hiki ana mai kahi hoa kamaʻaina. I ka papahana i ke Aukahi ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi. Oia hoʻi o ʻAnakē Nāmaka Rawlins. Ano leila nana no no pumai me kākou i keia pule. Ka ana mai I ka moʻolelo no ka hoʻokumu ia o ka ʻaha Pūnana Leo. Yeah, the last couple of weeks we've looked at the history of Hawaiian language, the rise, the decline, and then a little bit of the rise, again. And a lot of that has to do with the efforts of Pūnana Leo, and Hawaiian language education. So we have ʻAnakē Nāmaka Rawlins here tonight, Keala, to kind of share with us some of the history specific to ʻaha Pūnana Leo. No leila, aloha nui ʻAnakē. Hiki paha me ka wiki ke hoʻolauna ia ʻoe iho no ka poʻe kamaʻaina ʻole.
Ai. Aloha kākou. O wau o Nāmaka Rawlins no hilo mai au hana I ia ma ke aukaha ki ia manawa no ho wau ma pane ewa o ka mokupuni o Hawaiʻi. Ai, aloha Nāmaka, from here in Hilo, born and raised in Keaukaha, and currently live in Panaewa on Hawaii Mokupuni. Aloha.
Aloha. And hiki ke ano hoʻike, wiki, just your involvement with Pūnana Leo from when you started until now?
Okay, yes. I started as a volunteer at the Pūnana Leo Hilo. I was a student returning non-traditional, we call them today, non-traditional student returning to the university in my early 30s with two young children already in school, not having attended Pūnana Leo. They were a little older, two boys. And then, yes, so involved in that way when Hilo school started. I believe I was in my second year of ʻŌlelo Hawaii at Kulanui. Mm-hmm.
And then since then, you've held a couple of different positions with Pūnana Leo, yeah?
Oh, yes. So I volunteered with the school through 1990. In 1990, I was hired as the first executive director of ʻAha Pūnana Leo. So even though the organization was established in 1983, from the establishment of ʻAha Pūnana Leo until the first executive director, 7 years later in 1990, that was my role. So I did as a volunteer, I did what was needed at the school, at the Pūnana Hilo school. Part of like the renovations, well, not that I did the renovations, but we were as students in there and helping to get the school ready to open in March of 1985. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, mahalo.
Could have been April.
Ai Hilo me Honolulu, yeah, apelida.
Hilo and Honolulu, yeah.
No leila. Okay, mahalo. So you kind of just mentioned ʻaha Pūnana Leo, founded in the early 1980s. So why was ʻaha Pūnana Leo established? What was maybe the landscape of ʻŌlelo Hawaii at that time that led to its establishment?
Okay, in 1980, well, the founders of ʻAha Pūnana Leo, the organization, is a 501c3 nonprofit, so it's established as a nonprofit organization. The founders of the Pūnana Leo were, at the time, teachers. They were Hawaiian language kumu that were teaching at the university and high schools as well, and and they included, and the range, their I guess involvement with ʻŌlelo, Larry Kimura, being the first president of the organization, was already teaching at the university. There were young parents, the Pila Wilson and Kawanui Kamana, had already their child and was using Hawaiian in the home. And so these teachers were seeing that the language was not being used or alive
outside of the classroom.
And so so they decided, and also what happened the year before is that they did a survey which included Ile Beniamina from Ni'iha was also an original board member, founding member of the board. And they went out and they gathered a survey as to how many children were actually speaking Hawaiian. And when they counted, there were less than 50 that below the age of 18 that could speak Hawaiian. And this is in 1982. The other thing that was happening at the same time was that their friends from Aotearoa, Maori speakers, were here also studying at the University of Hawaii because they were all at Manoa, the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So they're here, their friends from Aotearoa here, and are also, highlighting what's going on back home in Aotearoa, where the movement, Pūnana Leo movement, is happening, and they challenge the founders of ʻAha Pūnana Leo. These would be, Hokulani Cleveland, which is the home in which they met when the founders of the organization met at Hokulani Cleveland's home in Kauai, gathered. So it was Hokulani Cleveland, and he was like 39 years old. The next oldest was Larry Kimura, 37, and the rest of them all younger, 31. Ile Beniamini, I think, was maybe the baby at 27 years old. Noel Warner, another young 29-year-old. These are all young. And then, like I said, the Wilson and Kamana as young parents. So anyway, they met in 1982. They had a survey in hand. They knew how many speakers were left that could speak below the children below the age of 18, and they had Maori friends that were challenging them. This is what they're doing back home, and their kohanga reo had been established, and Pūnana Leo languageness, Pūnana Leo languageness. Yeah.
Mahalo. So, okay, so the organization is founded, right? That's the organization. But then we got to open schools. That's a different process. And then from the Pūnana Leo, really from the Pūnana Leo came the Kula Kaiapuni system that we know of today. So what was that process like in creating the schools from preschool and into eventually kindergarten and first grade and so on and so forth with Kaiapuni? And what were some of the obstacles that the organization faced in creating these schools?
Okay, so the very first thing was the regulations. So the state of Hawaii centers, these were called centers because the environment that was created was bringing babies with speakers together in an all-day setting where only Hawaiian would be used and language acquisition would come in that kind of a natural state. However, the state regulates how centers are, come about and who's in these centers, who can be with these children, who can be with the babies. And so the regulations of certification was a hindrance because our teachers, the speakers were older, the kupuna. The kupuna were our teachers in the program. Those of us that were second language learners were there to to kokua, but the fluency and the use of it was coming from the native speakers. And so that was the first, law that we had to change. We had to change the way in which a person might be counted as qualified in a language care setting. And so we got that in, that kind of had to go a couple of times. I think we introduced it in 1985, and in a couple of years we got that changed. And then subsequent to that, when the children were then graduating. So the first graduating class, those children, we had nothing ready for them. There wasn't any place for them to go. And so the second graduating class that would have been eligible to go into kindergarten in 1986, we had to change the law, and which we did just in time for them to get into a public Pūnana Leo model, but that wasn't ready for them in 1986. So the law that I'm talking about was the 1896 ban on Hawaiian language use in public education. And so we got that changed. However, we weren't able to get into a physical facility until the following year in 1987. And that was the establishment of the Kula Kaiapuni, because the year before, the parents in Hilo actually did a boycott, and they held their kid, they called it a Papa Kaiapuni Hawaii, which was the class in the Hawaiian language environment. So it was held at the Pūnana Leo Hilo. They held out until the following year as we pushed to open up that classroom, and it opened up in Hilo at Kaiapuni, the Kula Kaiapuni o Keaukaha, which is the school, Kula Kaiapuni, and then on Waiau on Oahu. So Keaukaha on Hawaii Island and Waiau on Oahu Island. So the children then were able to enter into public education, and those were combined classes of kindergarteners and the first graders that were, the boycott kindergarteners, not first graders. Yeah.
And this boycott was in what year?
That was 1986.
1986.
Yeah.
So just to give a little bit of context, I went to Pūnana Leo o Kona. I was a part of the first class at Pūnana Leo o Kona, which opened in 1994. And when I graduated from Pūnana Leo and tried to go to Kaiapuni, we actually had to do the same thing. This is 7-8 years later, right? And so it wasn't like just a one-time thing. That's what they did in Hilo. That's how they got a Kaiapuni. And maybe it happened other places too, but I remember the same thing happening in Kona with the first students of Pūnana Leo Kona. So for my kindergarten year, I actually went back to Pūnana Leo Kona. We were separate from the Pūnana Leo kids, but we were on the same campus in a smaller room. So same thing, right? And so a lot of the Kula Kaiapuni today actually come from the Pūnana Leo, or the communities where the Pūnana Leo were founded and stood. Okay, so this was this we're talking in the mid 80s, right? Honolulu or Hilo and Honolulu are Pūnana Leo. So here we are, 2022, almost kanaha makahiki afterwards. 40 years later. In fact, ʻAha Pūnana Leo will make 40 years next year. In 2023. So how has the program grown from the beginning, right? We started with ʻelua kula. Now we get ʻumikumakolu kula. What are some of the how has the program grown, and maybe what are some of the some of the results that we have to show for it?
Well, there's just so much to I guess highlight. I think the decision to push into the public education, the decision to call the state on the 2 official languages, therefore we have this, the right to an education in Moʻolelo. I think that's kind of 40 years later, we have it, nobody's going to question that. That's the established, it's been established. We can say that. The other decision to grow the program, to go through the program and build it up, the vertical, going every year. So the lead class at Waiau and Keaukaha and the Pūnana Leo was very involved in ensuring that those schools that opened up subsequent, like what you're describing in Kona, happened at Molokai too. So wherever we had a Pūnana, we ensured that was going to have the path. So I think 40 years later, when you're reflecting on on the work and the persistence of the leadership, the families that were involved, and and continue to be involved, and to choose Ō'olelo Hawaii for their families. I think that's a because we can talk about we have books now. We are writing books in our Ō'olelo now. We have like I said, it's not the perfect, but it's a system that not only can, but needs to be nurtured and have have the I guess the determination that this would be a viable, our kids are akamai, and that we have, this is a the brain. There's all kinds of good stuff. So you can talk about all the good stuff, about reading in Hawaii and about the brain development and all these other good things. And then we even have teacher certification. We have a teacher program that prepares teachers in the public education. You have to have your license and everything like that. So although in Pūnana Leo we continue to have the exemption that we won in 1985, and then the public education pathway in Hawaiian medium education, and that there are teachers that can have a career and be certified and have a career in Ō'olelo. And so I think another thing that the Pūnana Leo movement has done is it created a this sort of what's happening even on the English medium education, the place-based Hawaiian education, Hawaiian culture-based education, and all that. Those place-based education happens. That's because of the Pūnana Leo. The Pūnana Leo changed the way education is being delivered in Hawaii. It changed the faces of kumu in classrooms that are, mirroring the student population too. So all of these things, I attribute that to Pūnana Leo movement. And so 40 years, I mean, that's my ko'umo manaʻo.
Mahalo. Mahalo ʻoe ʻAnakē. Ua lava paha keia no ka manawa. But again, right, we're talking about 40 years of the program, and you've been in it since what year it was?
1983. Established in February. Yeah. I was on campus in August of 1983 going to my papa Ō'olelo Hawaii.
So not just 40 years of a papahana, but 40 years for you personally of service to the papahana, to Ō'olelo Hawaii. Mahalo nui
all
ʻoe.
the other guys, all this, Larry is still, Larry and Kawanoi, they're all.
We're gonna get them later, hopefully. We're gonna get them later, hopefully.
Yeah. Mai kai.
No leila, mahalo ʻoe ʻAnakē. Mahalo ʻoukou ka poʻe hoʻolohe mai. Ahui hou kākou I kekahi pule aku. Aloha.